Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free, 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV 1230 on the AM dial. We are streaming live on Google+, and if you are just tuning in, you can go to youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, that's one word, and make sure and click on the featured button to view us live. Or you can listen to the show at your computer at KLAV1230am.com. Today we will be talking about writing for newspapers and magazines. Whether you would like to write short stories or print articles for magazines and newspapers, we're going to talk about the many ways you can go about doing that and getting published. My guests today are authors Judy Logan, Darlien, and Thibiti Lewis. Thibiti, are you there?
I am. How are you doing today, James?
Great, sir. All right, before we get started, I would like to check in with, is Kevin on the line? All right, we'll probably check back with Kevin later on. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV 1230 on the AM dial. To start off the show, we would like to start off with a few fun facts and quotes, and I'm going to start by reading the first one. Out of the 215 countries and regions, China, Japan, and India are the countries with the largest number of newspapers by average.
Did you know that the top 3 selling newspapers in America are the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the New York Times? However, here in Las Vegas, the Review-Journal is our top paper.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darlene. And Thibiti, would you like to take number 3?
Sure. The top 3 selling magazines in the world are People, followed by Time, followed by Sports Illustrated.
That's interesting. And Judy, would you like to take the 4th one?
Don't get it right, just get it written. James Thurber.
And that's pretty much the way it should be, right?
Right, absolutely.
All right. And Thibiti's calling in from Washington State. Thibiti, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am currently the Associate Chair of English and an Associate Professor of English and American Studies at Washington State University, Vancouver. And I myself publish widely in the areas of African American literature, African American studies, and race and sport. And I teach about literature and sport. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and when I lived there, I used to write a weekly column in one of the local newspapers. And I've written over the years for many different newspapers and magazines, such as The Source magazine, Crisis magazine, News One. And I've also done some work delivering cultural commentaries for some of the local Portland radio stations. And I used to have a radio station
I know, yeah.
Once a week. So this is quite a treat. And I recently published a book that has really been getting quite a bit of publicity and drawing quite a bit of interest, and is really relevant to much of what is going on in contemporary sport culture. The title of the book is called Ballers of the New School, Race and Sport in America, Third World Press. And I have a website that's tied to that, which is www.ballersoftheNewSchool.com. So this book deals with, dynamics of race and sport in American culture, trying to sort of look at contemporary athletes within the context of the influence of hip-hop culture and engaging these notions of post-race America. Right. And I'm using the book to engage race in America because, people don't feel comfortable discussing this topic, but
right.
It inundates our society. So that's the gist of me.
Well, you've written for several newspapers and magazines. In fact, you wrote for The Source magazine, Crisis magazine, News One, the St. Louis American, and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and then Oregon Humanities magazine, and is that Oregonian?
Oregonian, yeah.
Oh, Oregonian, okay. So
Correct.
You definitely have experience in this field.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And Judy's joining us in the studio. Judy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, James, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh,
I'm
you're
thrilled to
welcome.
be here.
Thank you.
I was born in Boston, in case you can't tell.
No.
Yeah.
Right. I thought Texas for sure.
And I was raised in Quincy, the city of Presidents on the South Shore of Massachusetts. I moved here to Vegas in 2010, and I joined the Henderson Writers Group, where I'm currently serving as a librarian. And although I've been writing forever, I like to joke that I probably signed my own birth certificate. My fellow writers and authors at the Henderson Writers Group have helped me, write conscientiously. And that's the whole point, writing conscientiously. I credit that help with my publishing 3 short stories, 2 of them in Wildflower magazine, and 1 in the Writer's Block 4, which is currently available for sale.
Okay.
And I want to thank also the Las Vegas Writers Conference, which is held each year in April, because through that I actually signed a book contract this
All right.
year for my first
Congratulations.
novel.
All right.
So I'm thrilled. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Darlene, who's also here in the studio, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, James, and thank you so much. Like Judy, I was practically born with a pen in my hand, so I've always written, but just the last few years have I been serious about it. My childhood was rather isolated. I lived on a copper and gold mine with my grandparents.
Okay.
I have no siblings, so writing was, what we did.
Your great escape.
Well, and of course in those days no television, and because we were isolated, we didn't have newspapers. You name it, we didn't have it. That's
So you created it.
well, had to, So I had imaginary friends. I had imaginary everything, so it worked out pretty well
As
for
long
me.
as you still don't have imaginary friends, you're okay.
Oh, darn. I knew there was a catch to those people. I wondered why they looked so ghostly. I just thought they were dieting. But, I've been a little of everything. I taught school. I was an import-exporter. I have owned several businesses. I owned a glass factory, actually.
Wow.
And a beauty shop, some other stuff that came along the way. But then after I retired from teaching, I got very serious about my writing, and I've been published in Books in Motion, Critics Online. I've been in every of the writers'
blocks.
anthologies, and just wrote the foreword to the latest one. And I have a series of books, A Life of Crime, Cruising for Crime, and coming out this year through Mystic Publishers will be my last of that series, which is called A Twist in Crime. And so, writing is sort of what I do, and it's where I live, and it's what I love to do.
That's great. I would like to go back to Judy for a minute. I know you landed in Las Vegas in 2010.
Yes.
But your writing career started way before then.
Oh, way
I'm
back,
assuming.
yeah. I've always written. I wrote plays in high school. Then I got very involved in my church, and I began writing sermons and became certified to be a lay preacher. And I'm putting together now a book of sermons that I've done for children and adults over the years. And I've write for a living every day, although it's very different than my fiction writing. My QA people keep reminding me, you're writing technically, Judy, not fiction. I write training programs for a big healthcare company.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is really great. And then at night, if I'm not too tired, I'll do something creative like write fiction.
All right. Well, I'd like to remind our listeners, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, right here on KLAV 1230 on the AM dial in Las Vegas. And on your computer, you can find us on the internet at KLAV1230am.com. And if you're trying to view us live, you can go to youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, and that's all one word, Aspects of Writing. And then make sure and click on the featured button. My guests are Judy Logan, Darlien Breeze, and Thibiti Lewis. We're going to talk a little bit about the whole aspect of newspapers and magazines, and I'm going to let Judy start with that.
The beginning of the American newspapers as we know them today began in the early 18th century with the publication of the first colonial newspapers. It was James Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's older brother, who first made a news sheet containing more than just a garbled mass of stale items. James Franklin published the New England Current at his own risk. He was encouraged to do so by a number of associates. These respectable characters were known as the Hellfire Club. Sounds like Boston.
Yeah.
They succeeded in publishing a paper of different castes, which, although it shocked the New England orthodoxy, nevertheless proved vastly entertaining and established a kind of literary precedent.
Okay, and Thibiti, I'm going to let you pick up from there. Hello, Thibiti, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. The first printed newspaper, am I moving along effectively, or am I incorrect here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to read the next one.
Why
and
don't
then-
you?
Yeah, and we're going to let Darlien pick up after that, and we'll get right back to you, Thibiti, I promise. The turbulent years between 1775 and 1783 were a time of great trial and tribulation among newspapers. Interruption, suppression, and lack of support checked their growth substantially. Although there were 43 newspapers in the United States when the Treaty of Peace was signed in 1783, as compared to 37 on the date of Battle of Lexington on 1775, only a dozen remained in continuous operation between the two events. And most of those had experienced delays and difficulties through lack of paper, type, and patronage. Not one newspaper in the principal cities, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, continued publication throughout the war. When the colony forces were in possession, royalist papers were suppressed, and at times British occupation revolutionary papers moved away or were discontinued. Or they became royalists, only to suffer at the next turn of the military fortunes. Thus, there was an exodus of papers from the cities along the coast to the smaller inland plains, or places, where alone it was possible for them to continue without interruption. Scarcity of paper was acute. Type worn out, could not be replaced. So obviously there was a problem during this time just to get the paper alone to write with. And then you had to have someone to read it.
And
So-
you know, James, that brings up an interesting point. Actually, in 1692, with the Salem witch trials of Boston, part of the problem there was an economic issue. The land had been subdivided so many times between succeeding generations that there were no trees left to pay Reverend Parrish. And that's part of what drove his paranoia, and obviously it spilled over to his kids. So by the 1700s, those lands had not replenished those trees the way they needed to. They used it for fuel, they used it for paper, they used it for any number of things, and it was very scarce.
Yeah, okay. Darlien,
All
would you like to
right.
take up from there?
Well, yes. Well, Mr. Noah Webster of Webster Dictionary fame was strapped for money back in the late 1793 era. So he borrowed $1,500 from Alexander Hamilton to move to New York City and edit a Federalist newspaper. In December, he founded New York's first daily newspaper, American Minerva, which was later known as the Commercial Advisor. He edited this paper for 4 years, writing the equivalent of 20 volumes of articles and editorials. He also published the semi-weekly publication, The Herald, a gazette for the country, later known as the New York Spectator. As a partisan, he soon was denounced by the Jeffersonian Republicans as, boy, and catch me on these words, he was parsimonious,
There we go.
half-begotten, self-dubbed patriot, an incurable lunatic, and a deceitful newsmonger. Boy, I hate this guy already. Pedagogue and a quack. Fellow Federalist Corbett labeled him a traitor to the cause of federalism, calling him a toad in the service of, boy, watch this
He was
one,
well liked, wasn't he?
sans-culotism, or
Sounds
the
like a-
radical partisans of the lower classes, typical urban laborers. A spiteful viper and a
Are you through?
almost. Oh, this guy's awful. Anyway, I can't go on. He's too terrible to
that's
talk
right, yeah.
about. He was the master of words was distressed. Even the use of words like the people, democracy, and equality in public debate bothered him, for such words were metaphysical abstractions that either have no meaning or at least none that mere mortals can comprehend. Whew!
Well, that was a mouthful.
Wasn't it, though?
It sounds like our campaigns today.
I know. Sound like we were campaigning. If you are listening, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV in Las Vegas, and my hosts are Judy Logan, Darlien Breeze, and Thibiti Lewis. This is going to be for the panel, and if you need to know something about submitting articles or newspapers, how do you format your work and who do you present it to? Thibiti, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I like that question because I teach often creative nonfiction courses, but just my own career. So one of the things that I think one has to do, say if you're trying to submit editorials, for example, in a local newspaper, the first thing one wants to do is make sure that they're really clear regarding the guidelines. And I know that sounds very simple, but remember, they're reading hundreds of submissions a day, or, they're getting quite a nice volume. I won't say the exact number. And so they're looking for every reason to dump you out.
Okay.
One of the other things that I look to do is, say for an editorial pieces, it sounds obvious, but this notion of looking for really kind of unique topical issues. One thing I was thinking about myself last week was, I'd be nice to write a piece looking at the upcoming 4th of July and what kind of angle could I use, and I was going to examine an essay written by Thurgood Marshall and Frederick Douglass's What to the American Slave is the 4th of July, and situate that through the context of the 4th of July. And maybe it flies, so you want to think about contemporary issues. But if they select electronic submissions or hard copy submissions, you have to keep in mind that some of them, may ask you to submit multiple things at a time, and also it's important that, I think those are the kind of basic things that one wants to keep in mind. Think about their page limits. What do they ask for? You also should really pay close attention to the kind of content that those different journals or magazines are asking for, because you want to make sure you're really aligning yourself to the type of work that they are dealing with. And one good thing that writers could do as you're submitting your stuff to multiple places is you can make a kind of spreadsheet for yourself to track your submissions.
Okay.
And just publication name, submission date, those kind of things. So that you can really sort of, keep an idea of where you sent things. And, I think people should keep in mind that so many people are submitting pieces that these editors are just, I want to reiterate, looking for reasons to reject pieces. So,
I think, isn't it also important to make sure that you're targeting newspapers and magazines that deal with the articles that you've written? I would think that's important. You have to definitely research that.
Exactly, but also you may write something that maybe it may not function for some of the magazines that are out there, and you begin to say, well, maybe this needs to be something for a book project. But yes, without a doubt, things that you've written or things that you're thinking about writing, you say, okay, well, this will work here. Sports Illustrated, River Teeth for this, Fourth Genre for that, this particular newspaper, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, those places, it becomes a little more difficult. So the key is that pitch, too, really pitching with vision to the different journal, the newspaper editors, et cetera.
I think you have a very good point there. I think that's very solid. And there, if I may interrupt for just a second, sure, thank you. There's a number of excellent publications that you can access to look up your audiences, to look up topics, things like the Writer's Market Guide, things like Gale Publications, every imaginable publication on every topic, every industry, anything you would want to look will be found in Gale's publications. So I think if you really hone down what genre you want to write in, what your topic is going to be, and your slant. Not all magazines are created equal, so you want to look at your slant. You wouldn't send, an article on dog sledding to, Southern Comfort or Southern whatever that is. Southern Comfort sounds good right about now.
What did you have before you came to the studio?
Really? Should have been a liquid lunch, but anyway.
Darlien, how do you feel about that?
Well, I agree with what both of them have said, but I want to point out that there are other avenues to getting name recognition through the newspaper. And sometimes when the editors, the people who pick up your articles, recognize your name, that's a kind of a foot in the door. And one way you can do that is by writing letters to the editor predicated on articles that the newspaper has printed, or in response to other people who have written to the letters to the editor column. Something else you might consider, many newspapers, and I know a lot of magazines also, conduct contests, usually holiday centered, but they'll have a Christmas contest, a holiday 4th of July type of thing. These are ways to promote yourself and also get the editors to recognize your name the next time you put in a serious article.
Do you have anything else to add to that, Thibiti?
Yeah, can I just tail in onto the last comment? Was that
Sure. That was Darlene.
Darlene? Excellent point. One thing you talked about holidays. One thing a writer could do is just think about different holidays and find angles, write them ahead of time, and then as those periods come, perfect times to send out those editorials. As you go along.
Well, that's a question I have for all three of you. Do you? And this is for all three of you, so anyone can answer. Do you write articles in advance in anticipation of the coming year or whatever?
Absolutely. I think most magazines and newspapers that I've dealt with look for a 6-month lead time for any seasonal material.
Okay.
So if you're going to write something for Mother's Day, you better get it in by August or September of the previous year. Hasn't them?
That's true. And I think most of us do that. We do write articles or stories ahead of time in anticipation of somebody wanting that type of story. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to the holidays, they're always looking for something to fill in, hopefully to kind of a cushion from some of the bad news that we get all the time.
And Thibiti, the same for you?
Yeah, or at least notes sort of outlining the ideas, and as I was saying, sometimes I will craft a sort of pitch to that editor and see if there's some interest as well. But, with or without them, I agree with the group. I'm writing because I love to write and I want to explore different ideas, and so someone will take it.
So,
and I also think that people should remember that I've met and gone to listen to but interacted with an enormous number of writers, and so people who you see in print have experienced far more rejection than acceptance, and that is just a matter of a plethora of things that have nothing to do with your talent often. So you just can't be sort of disenchanted because your work doesn't get published.
Well, in that regard, it's the same as for authors as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yep, absolutely. And James, just one last thing, if I may. You might want to also check things like Writers Magazine, because they often have calls for submissions. And a lot of the books that they mention, things like Glitter Train is a wonderful magazine that calls for submissions for seasonal things. Things like Mused is another magazine. They all have their, winter solstice, summer solstice, all that kind of thing. And they'll call for submissions for contests. So that's another way to break into magazine writing.
Okay. All right. Darlene, did you have something to say?
Well, no, I really am going along with what they have said here, and I've had some success with the letters to the editor thing, and I've also joined in the fray for the contests that the various newspapers run, and was fortunate enough to win the Review Journal's Christmas contest here a couple years back. So,
okay.
It's one
Now,
more little notch in your...
Absolutely. So, Thibiti, you had mentioned something about submitting a line or something to the editor. So it's kind of like an author would do with a proposal?
Yeah, an in-depth query, though. And then with that query, if I have it pre-written, I'll also attach it, or, making it clear, hey, I can, I just will attach it. And so if I have it all the way written, I will attach it. If I don't, I'll post the query. And that has been successful. And the key is enough detail that it's not just, you just have a bit of an idea, but, wow, you really, and making it clear that I've already written this. Would you like to take a look,
Well, this next question is going to be for all three of you, but I'm going to start off with Darlene. And Darlene, has your work as a novelist been a benefit for writing newspapers and magazines, or vice versa?
Absolutely, because basically I'm a short story writer. I have managed to arc my short stories into novels, but in a short story, you cut to the chase. You don't have a lot of time for all of the scenery and all of the extraneous things that you do in a long-term novel. So for the newspaper, that's perfect. They don't want a lot of extras. They want the information. They want to know what the nitty-gritty of the whole subject is. And so since you don't have time and space for all of the extras, actually the short stories have been invaluable for writing to that end.
You know what's interesting with what we're talking about here with newspapers and magazines is you keep saying condense. And last week I had a show on about writing music. And it's interesting how you can have a novel that's 500 or 600 pages, but then when you write a short story, it's got to be a lot less pages. Then when you write for newspaper or magazines, you've got to get a story in that short amount. And then a songwriter has to tell their story within 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
didn't think
really
about that,
interesting
yeah.
how we can manipulate words that way.
Absolutely. It's almost like poetry, which has to be so finely honed that one single word will give you a full-blown image.
Yeah.
And that's what music does for me.
So, Thibiti, I'm asking you that same question. How has writing novels influenced, or has newspapers influenced your writing for novels?
Well, I have not written a novel, but my collection of critical essays, in Ballers of the New School, Race, Sport, and American Culture. Actually, my book came about because I wrote the weekly editorial, and one of my colleagues said, you should just turn a number of those into a book because so many of them sort of take angles that deal with sport and race and society. And so I guess for me, I sort of, did more research and took the best ones and evolved it to the book that I have.
So actually your articles created your book.
Yeah, they really stimulated the interest, showed me that this was something that I was really interested in, and forced me to, engage more research and, sort of build out what would have been a 2-page piece into a 30 or 40-page essay.
Yeah. And the same for you, Judy. How has that influenced you?
Oh, it's influenced me tremendously. My novel began as a short story, and I don't know if we have time for a quick little anecdote.
Sure, go ahead.
I was working in a trucking company, believe it or not,
okay.
and helping my husband support our 3 kids, and I got laid off 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And I said to the terminal manager, how can you do that? We live hand to mouth. We're struggling. I was a secretary. My husband was a factory worker. What are we going to do? And the terminal manager said, well, I'm sorry. You make my other 4 women lazy. I can't put it all in one basket. You're gone. So I went home, and I'm crying, and I'm all upset, and I see Atlantic Monthly of all the magazines to try to break into. And they're calling for a story. So I had a story in my head of my grandmother who raised 7 children on her knees, literally. She was an old Irish scrub woman, and she went to Mass every day. Okay. And her husband died at 42, leaving her with 7 little children. She was telling me this story one day, and she said that she was coming home from scrubbing floors at night, was sitting in Harvard Square, and it was sunny, and she thought, oh my, maybe I'll see Danny, my husband. And she realized he'd been dead 10 years.
Oh.
And that struck me because she cried.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard my grandmother cry. So I wrote this story, and I sent it in, and I told Frank and the kids, when we win this contest, it's $1,000. We're paying off all our bills, and we're going to go to the Hilltop Steakhouse, and we're going to have everything. Well, I got called back to work the week before Christmas, and I forgot about the story. So I got home one night from work. I worked the overnight shift, and Frank worked the day shift. And he said, come on, we're going to get dressed. We're going to the Hilltop. And I'm so excited. My heart is fluttering, and I'm just hysterical. And we got there, and he did something we never did. He bought me a glass of wine, and something should have told me.
And you haven't stopped since.
That was your clue.
So we can blame that on your husband.
I was thinking maybe I should have kept it up, but anyway. We go to the Hilltop, and soup to nuts, the glass of wine. I'm feeling very mellow and excited, waiting for this big hurrah. And he hands me the rejected manuscript. And I bursted out crying, and I'm hanging my head sobbing until I hear all around me 4 other voices going, and I look up, and every one of them is crying. And my little Michael, who was 5 years old, said, but Mama, we still love you. So I had won the prize.
Yeah, that's true. But you continue with your writing, so it definitely was the
But I want to know about the wine.
I'll buy you a bottle.
All right now, Darlien. All right. We're going to read a few more quotes here. I'm going to start off with, actually, this is an article, so we're just going to take turns reading it. The origin of the newspaper can be traced back to 131 B.C. The Romans carved announcements in stone and metal and posted them in public places. In 59 B.C., Rome published its first newspaper made public by Julius Caesar. And Darlien, would you like to pick up from there?
Well, we'll have to go back to the 8th century in China to find the world's first newspaper that resembled today's paper. In the 8th century, China created the I'm going to say this badly, Kayanzaboa
There we go.
Bulletin of the court. The daily news was collected by editors and handwritten on silk by writers. It was then sent to the provinces and read by the imperial officers during the Kayan era.
Well, so in other words, really, when they wrote it, it really wasn't for the mass or for the public. It was for the...
It was not for mass distribution. You know, an official would go to the village, he would read from his silk writings, and the villagers would take in whatever was of value to them. But no one got a newspaper. No one threw the silk on his porch,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
There were no
And
worms
so there was no
working in his
kitchen.
jobs
Right.
pulling the silk newspaper from the front door. Judy, would you like to pick up from there?
Sure. The first truly printed newspaper that we associate with today came only after Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1447. Even after this invention, people had to wait another 200 years until the first regularly published title in the English-speaking world. The earliest known copy of this newspaper is dated October 11th, 1621, and it can be found in the collection of Charles Felicki of New York City.
Okay. And I think, Thibiti, do you have that part, or you want me to go ahead with
Sure.
that?
The reason why the first modern newspaper appeared so late in history can be attributed to limited literacy prior to the 17th century.
Okay. So before the 17th century, education was really considered to be somewhat of a privilege for the wealthy or the noble because people just weren't educated.
Right, and I probably mentioned I'm the librarian, so
Yes, you are.
You're going to hear a lot of books from me. But there's a wonderful book called The Printing Press as an Agent of Change by a scholar named Elizabeth Eisenstadt, and she really talks about the fundamental shift in the world as the result of the printing press. It's comparable to our shift in the world when computers came on board.
Okay.
So if anybody's interested in the history of print, it's an excellent book. It's very pricey, but it's an excellent book.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
We have a caller, and we're going to take that call right now. It's Judy McFadden. Judy, are you there? Hello, Judy? No?
Hello.
Judy, are you there?
Yes.
This is James.
Hi, Judy.
Hello.
Hi, Judy.
I think you know a
guys
couple of the
can
people
hear-
here on the panel today.
Yeah, I do, and unfortunately, I'm not able to listen to the show live, but I will listen to it tomorrow.
Okay.
But I know the panel. My mentor, Darlien, is
Yes.
one of the person. Darlene listened to me read about Macduff until she got sick of it.
No, Judy.
She's a good egg.
And Judy, I just saw Judy at my farewell party, and thank you again for that lovely journal, Judy.
Oh, you're welcome, Judy. Miss you already.
Yeah.
And you guys, James, you've got consummate professionals on your show.
Thank you.
boy.
I really do. I'm
Now
very
that's
lucky.
tough to live up to, Judy.
Well, I know, but you guys are members of the Henderson Writers Group, and that was the group that kind of pulled me through when I started to write my book. So, and I put it in my acknowledgments. You know, you guys were a big help to me. Judy, were you there then?
No, actually, I was still in Massachusetts.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I know Darlene.
Yeah,
Darlene,
I was there right from the start. Yeah.
Well, just to tell people a little bit about who you are, Judy. Judy wrote a book with Life with Macduff, and he was a therapy dog. And in what people need to know now is you were living in Las Vegas until 3 days ago, and now you're in Ohio.
And we miss
Yes.
you.
And they're ready to throw me overboard. If I could get on a ship, they would throw me overboard because the weather is so. There were like 425,000 people without power
wow.
recently.
Oh, goodness.
And they are getting their power back on, but they're having heat advisories because it's like 95 degrees here, you know, with the humidity, and people do not have air conditioning.
And they
Now,
they think you brought it with you from
Right.
Las Vegas.
I talked to a friend in Vegas, and she told me if they kick me out, she's got a room for me back
Oh,
there.
bless her heart.
That's good.
I have a spare bedroom too, Judy. Don't forget.
Thanks. And I want you guys to know that the July-August issue of the Las Vegas Pet Scene magazine has a review of the book. And it's just everywhere. You know, you can get them at Albertsons, the libraries, Petland, you know, just
Oh,
a
that's
bunch of
cool.
places. They're free. But they got a very, very nice review of the book. And also the book that I have a story in called dogs and the women who love them. So anyway, you guys might want to check
just
that
for
out.
everybody's information, too, Judy's book about Macduff has literally gone all over the world.
Oh, yes, yeah.
She got emails from people in South Africa talking about that book. That's
And
how
it was
popular it became.
It was one of the finalists to be considered on Oprah's show,
Yes,
too.
that's true.
It's a wonderful book. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, and you know that if you Google Judy McFadden with aspects of writing, she's all over the world too.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I expect to see your next book soon.
And I'll tell you guys, Darlene and Judy, you are going to get publicity like you won't believe from being on Aspects of Writing.
Well, thank
I'm
you,
so
Judy.
excited.
Thank you.
Well, Judy, you're our shining star. You're our big example. Thank you.
Well, you guys are going to be shining too, because I think it's Tito. He puts it out there. You're guys. You're going to be everywhere. So
thank you.
I'm glad to talk to you, and I wish everybody the and I miss you already. I really
I know
do.
we miss you too.
Miss you
Judy.
too, Jude. You
So
take
you
good
guys
care.
take care.
All right,
You
thank
too.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We're going to read a few more fun facts and quotes, and I'm going to start off with Judy. Judy, would you like to take the first one?
Sure. Margaret Fuller, born 1810, died 1850, was the first American female foreign war correspondent. Described in her time as the most remarkable and greatest woman in America, Fuller opened many doors for American journalists. She was also quite a womanist. She's written a lot of literature about women's rights, even way back then.
And Thibiti, do you have number 2 there?
Yes, I'm happy to take number 2.
Okay,
Samuel
great.
L. Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910, celebrated humorist, was well known as a writer of novels, short stories, and sketches. Clemens also worked a good part of his life as a journalist. He learned the printer's trade at a young age, and after a brief stint as a Mississippi steamboat pilot and service in the Confederate Army, he headed west and became a reporter for papers in Nevada and California. Clemens' accounts of adventures in the Sandwich Islands of the Holy Land as a travel correspondent were also published in newspapers as a series of travel letters. Clemens was surprised to discover on his return that the letters had made him famous from coast to coast. And, can I just make a quick comment?
Absolutely, sure.
This is fantastic because he and many early American writers, Theodore Dreiser and others, writers has been essential to American literature. The very art of the narrative developed in this particular genre was really key in contemporary.
To put your business on the front.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Thibiti. We just lost you for just a minute. Can you hold on just 1 second here?
Press 9.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. I'm sorry. We're sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, sir.
I thought I was just talking about Clemens and the fact that he's a perfect example of the importance of American newspaper writing and its impact,
Okay.
the narrative, the importance of narrative on the development of early 20th century, late 19th century American literature.
And wasn't he a Missourian as well?
Indeed, yes.
As was I, along with you.
We've got the whole country covered.
Yeah, that's right.
Feeling and feeling very proud, right, about that Missouri connection.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thibiti, were the Sandwich Islands actually the islands of Hawaii?
I actually don't know that myself.
I'm
think-
not going to tell you.
I want to say they were, only because I saw an old map recently, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, I know he's an extensive traveler, Mark Twain. himself.
Yeah, definitely. He was awesome.
Well, just as an aside for Mark Twain, the term Mark Twain is actually a measurement of water. The old riverboat captains used to go up and down the rivers, and because the tides were always changing, they didn't know how deep the river was. So they would throw a line with a rock or something tied to it overboard, and if it was deep enough, then the ship could sail through. If not, they were going to get stuck on a sandbar and get bogged down. So Samuel Clemens was actually taking the watermark as his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Any young pilot learn quite a bit about, just remembering. You have to learn how to read. I mean, he has wonderful accounts reading the Mississippi River and knowing it, pretty much like memorizing it and then reading if it's changed. You know, he talks about that very art of being a steamboat captain and how difficult it actually is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we had Sue just Googled just because it happened to come up about the Sandwich Islands, and she just Googled it, and I guess it was part of the Hawaiian chain.
Woo.
Or is.
That would not be good to be wrong as the librarian.
Would not have been something, though.
I know. Give me that wine.
We'd have some calls on that one.
And I'm going to let Darlene take number 3 here.
Okay, and this is about Miss Nellie Bly, whose name was actually Elizabeth Cochran Seaman. She was born 1867 and died 1922. She was a world traveler reporter. Bly got her first newspaper job in Pittsburgh after writing an angry letter in response to an article titled, "What Girls Are Good For." Ooh, that's a hot one. She later gave up her Pittsburgh column on society, theater, and art for more daring reporting for the for the New York World.
Okay. And Thibiti, do you have number 4 there for Grantland Rice?
indeed, I do.
Okay.
Grantland Rice, 1880 to 1954, one of America's best-known and respected sports writers. Rice saw sports as life. His column, Sports Light, appeared in more than 100 newspapers. He estimated that he wrote 1 million words a year, 3,000 words a day, and traveled 15,000 miles a year to bring stories to his readers.
That is incredible. I can't even imagine writing 3,000 words a day, and I am a writer, so maybe I do and don't realize it. I don't know. And Judy, would you like to take the 5th one?
Sure. Ernie Pyle. Always reminds me of Gomer Pyle. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But he was born in 1900, died in 1945, and he was perhaps the best-known reporter of all time. Pyle covered the human side of the news in a folksy, chatty style. With his wife, Jerry, he traveled the United States and the world in search of stories about ordinary heroes. During World War II, Pyle mixed with soldiers in Europe and the Pacific and followed them into battle. His columns at home gave readers a glimpse of war from what he called the worm's eye view.
Do any of you have any comments about any other famous writers who may have contributed to the newspaper or magazine era?
You know, I think all of them probably have contributed in some way or another, whether they wrote directly to the newspaper. All of them, I think, have been quoted, and Somerset Maugham comes to mind because of his quote about novels, and his famous quote that I love is that there are only 3 rules about novel writing. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. and I just love that, but every time you read an article about writing, you will read about, Mr. Somerset Maugham and his comments.
And how about you, Judy? Do you have any comments about?
I do. I love the phrase that you asked me to read right from the beginning. Don't get it right, just get it written. My husband, God rest his soul, was functionally illiterate.
Okay.
Back in the days when men his age, he would have been in his 70s now. Then they didn't understand dyslexia, and yet he helped me get through a master's degree program, and would listen to me read my stories, but not until I had put the end on the story, because he knew if I had an audience anywhere between chapter 1 and chapter whatever, I'd stop. And he would make sure that I would not let him hear my stories until I was done. And I have to credit him. He actually dug a piece of cement into the ground and sunk the kid's play set into it and told me to come out and sign my initials in the rain. And of course that's long gone, but he's getting the joke now because I've got a book coming out. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
So it's amazing how our lives influence our writings.
Absolutely. You have to write. Don't wait till it's right, just write.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's so true.
One of the things I'd like to talk about a little bit here is what it must have been like for Nellie Bly to have written at a time when women really weren't given the same education as men. I know from my own experience in my own family, in my grandmother's era, there were 8 children, and it was the men who inherited the land and were allowed to go to school. She finished high school, but she wanted to go on to college, but that they thought that was foolish. So it's interesting how women still made it through this.
Absolutely. I think, if I may, I think that women have always had a drive, like any writer, to be able to witness to their world and to be able to help other people experience the world, perhaps through their eyes, or even give them something to think about and to look at their own world. And I think women have always written, although they haven't always been published. And as we go back now through our church histories and things, we're starting to gather all that old material. I think of Sojourner Weaver. She wrote, slave narratives. I think of all the women that, back in the 1700s that wrote stories that have never been published, but they're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And Alice Walker talks about how she went in search of her mother's graves when she looked for Zora Neale Hurston's gravestone, and found out that Hurston, although a PhD, had never been published because she was a black woman. And Alice Walker went looking for her grave, couldn't find one, because she had been, Hurston had been buried in poverty, and so she put a gravestone on there, and she brought Hurston's works back out so that we'd have the benefit of this fabulous woman writer.
That is amazing.
Yep.
Thibiti, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, Hurston didn't get a PhD, but she did have a pretty illustrious career. She got a BA, anthropologist. I do agree, though, what all of the panelists are pointing out. People forget the importance of newspaper and magazine writing. I'm an African-American, teach African-American literature and American literature, and when I think about Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway, or Theodore Dreiser, or any number of writers, you see the impact of honing the craft of the narrative. And when I think about African-American literature, I think of people like Henry Highland Garnet and Alexander Crummell and Frederick Douglass, who started his own newspaper, the North Star, that was instrumental to getting information out, and the newspaper really functioning as a sort of to deal with issues of the day. And speaking of which, since we're talking about the importance of newspaper writers, one of the problems, or one of the things that concern me today, is that because of the advances in technology, we have this real pressure. I think all of the panelists understand that I'm talking about on writers to produce material quickly before it becomes old news. Right?
Yeah.
So it becomes old news in a matter of an hour, and there's a new posting and a new posting. And the problem that it poses for us is that instead of us getting the depth that we need, we're forced to give the sound bites, or we read more sound bite type news. And so as a result, it has the propensity for misguiding readers, and it's good and bad, and so it's really a sort of a conundrum, if you will, or a complicated issue for us in the current day.
Well, I think what you're saying is very accurate, and unfortunately, because of the speed of the information, I do think we get a lot of misinformation. And if you start reading on any subject, you're going to have, half a dozen or more opinions, all of them purporting to be the correct one.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting, what you just said a while ago, Thibiti, as well, about the fact that news is instant, is I got up this morning, got on the computer, was looking over a few notes we have for the show today, and pops up on the screen is that Andy Griffith passed away this morning.
Exactly.
So, it's truly instantaneous.
Exactly.
It's with this electronic media, now it's going to be on the news tonight, but it's old news by this evening.
Exactly, and I think that's the crux for us as writers, to recognize that we don't have tons of time anymore to develop a concept and then a product and put it out there. We have to hone our writing so that it's quick jabs, almost like a laser beam into an apple, because that's all the attention span we're going to get from people. So it forces us to hone our writing to be as crisp and as descriptive as it can be, almost like what you were talking about with music, James.
Right, how they create a story in 3 minutes.
Absolutely, and writers have to do that.
and also strategic, understanding there's this immediacy, the now. So we respond to that as our first line of defense, but understanding that we're also crafting the depth that I talked about for the Atlantic Monthly, for let me try to think of another journal or article, the Swanee Review or the Virginia Quarterly or the
Mother Jones.
The Alaska Review or the Scholars, Scholars Press or the Harvard Review or American Scholar or, those type of entities, so that we're responding to it, but then also really pushing forward to craft the sort of in-depth work that will come out a week later in the New Yorker or somewhere like that. So it is a struggle. It's a struggle.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have anything to add to our topic this evening?
Well,
I guess so.
Notice we're writers. We both start with the word well. Actually, our other word is the. We do that very well. No, I want to thank you for having us on the show today. I think all of the comments from Judy and from Tabitha, I think Thibiti, I've said that incorrectly, were right on, and I really appreciate being here.
Me too. I think it's just been a joy, and I've loved to hear what Thibiti has to say as a professor of Black Studies and American literature. I know a guy in Oregon who is actually writing a book about the Green River murders. He was one of the investigative auditors. No, what do you call them? Officers. Thank you. And he didn't know about creative nonfiction, so I'm going to turn him on to you.
And you had something to add?
Say, how about the what is the In True Blood? If he's going to do that, he might want to think about Capote, right? And
definitely.
But I would like to say that if I have a second to just sort of, I know we're running out of time.
You got about 2 minutes.
Okay, we're always people. You're a writer before you even know it, and I just think about the first time I realized the power of words and being a writer. I was in the 6th grade, and I was called into the principal's office and thought I was in trouble because we'd gone to a basketball game for free and we were forced to write about it. And the principal made me the reporter for the school basketball team. And it empowered me because these 8th graders who've been kind of pushing me around suddenly were trying to, curry favor with me. And so I realized, wow, there's real power in doing this.
There is, absolutely. And I think I already told you I actually signed my own birth certificate. So there you go.
That's right. So it's really, it's really intriguing. So anyway, I would just like to say for people to learn more about me and my work, please visit, www.ballersofthenewschool.com or www.thibittilewis.com, and you can, if you want to talk more, I'd be happy to talk.
Okay, and I'm going to ask Darlene and Judy the same thing. Where can they learn more about your work?
Yes, if you want to look me up online, my name is Darlien, Darlien, like a lien on your house. Darlene C. breeze.com.
Okay, and I have a website at sites.google.com/site/the LV Writers /Judy-Logan. I'm also on Twitter at Shine Logan, and I'm also on Facebook at Judy Shine Logan.
All right, we're going to go into the last.
James.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to go into the last minutes of the segment here. Next Tuesday on July 10th at 2 o'clock, I'm going to premiere a new show called Behind the Scenes with Sandy Costello and James Kelly, and we're going to take an in-depth look at what it takes to create, produce, and present some of Las Vegas's biggest shows, and we're also going to go behind the scenes of motion pictures and television shows as well as events. On Tuesday, July 17th, Aspects will return to discuss writer's block. We will discuss the many ways to stir the creative juices and keep them flowing. My guest is going to be author Stephen Brannon, and that's going to be interesting because I'm actually going to talk about my novel for a change with Stephen. Okay. So to sum it up, on Tuesday, Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, and every other week it's going to be Behind the Scenes with Sandy Costello and James Kelly. So I'm going to be on every Tuesday. It's just a different show each Tuesday. You can find links and information about my guests on the Aspects of Writing website at aspectsofwriting.com. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV and on the internet at KLAV1230am.com. Keep in mind, we rebroadcast every Wednesday on VegasAllNetRadio.com at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can view us live here in the studio at KLAV on YouTube.com. Just go to youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, that's one word, and click on the feature button. For future air dates and lineups, you can go to your computer and log on to aspectsofwriting.com, and we have that information there. Please sign our guest book while visiting Aspects of Writing website. You can post questions or comments on our guest book as well, and email us at aspectsofwriting@yahoo.com. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV. This is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it.